Hi, my name is Bob, and I'm here to talk to you about some new and exciting stuff that we've got going on the Windows platform. I'm a software engineering manager at Microsoft. I work primarily on Windows passwordless authentication, all things Windows Hello, and things in the satellite of that. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Hello and how we got here, and then, of course, some of the new things that we got brewing. Windows Hello means a lot of things to a lot of people, and I kind of working in this space for the last 13 years. I just wanted to give you kind of what it means to me. And so Windows Hello can draw its origin story to smart card authentication. So smart cards, for anyone who's too young to know what that is, it's basically like a credit card that you got in your pocket. It's got a little integrated circuit chip in it, and you're able to create private keys and issue certificates to this, and with an appropriate reader, you can plug it into a Windows device and use it for authentication. Smart cards have a natural, nice property of being a separate form factor that's a separate device from Windows, and so it can very elegantly meet the something you have factor of a MFA promise. And so you combine that with typically something you know, like a PIN to authenticate with, and then crypto can be done and you can log on. And that's a common strategy that folks use to deploy certificate authentication through their domain. Now, what we noticed over the years is that some people, particularly like in road warrior sort of scenarios, like they would plug in their smart card into their laptop reader and just like duct tape it to the side, or take the dongle of the reader and kind of affix it to the back of their laptop. And so we thought if people are kind of trying to keep these things kind of co-located together and the scenario sort of accommodated that, we would sort of just try to virtualize the smart card itself. And so we created a virtual smart card in Windows 8.1. And so to leverage the something you have property for a virtual smart card, we use the TPM chip, the trusted platform module that's in a lot of most Windows devices. And so you still have to have physical access to the device. That becomes the something you have, and you pair that again with a PIN, and that's the something you know, and we have an MFA promise here for virtual smart cards. So physical and virtual smart cards serve a great use case in the enterprise, but with certificates comes PKI and all the deployment and certificate renewal and all the rest. And that's a challenge for a lot of organizations, and it's completely not a good story for consumer. And so that's why we ended up coming up with Windows Hello. So natural predecessor to virtual smart cards, you can create credentials in Windows Hello. They are bound to the TPM, and it's, for by and large, for the most case, it's just a public key kind of protocol that we play with it. Now, this is around the time when we were starting to think of, FIDO was kind of coming out, and we were looking at what was going on in the security key space, and leaning in on what we had learned before with like virtualizing a physical smart card. You could sort of virtualize a security key, and that was sort of the inspiration for like a platform authenticator kind of a thing. And a few years after that, we actually got Windows Hello certified as a platform authenticator in the Alliance. And so between then and now, we've leaned in even more. Windows Hello has actually started to power lots of interesting scenarios on Windows. If anyone's been paying attention recently, we've gotten into the data protection business by protecting some consumer AI workloads with the recall experience. Closer to home, we've been continuing to build on the user experience and the capabilities that Windows offers for Passkeys, as you might have heard if you listened to Sushma and Ritesh's talk earlier. And so in that vein, today I'm going to talk about a couple new things that are coming to Windows. One is support for plug-in passkey providers natively through a native API extension point, and a Microsoft passkey provider for use cases on Windows. And so let's start by talking about the plugins. So to begin, just a slide really for the plugin developer crowd. Plugins that you will use on Windows will be COM objects that implement a COM API. They are packaged apps, and you will receive CTAP, CBOR encoded WebAuthn requests, so like a real WebAuthn request. Benefits to you as a plugin provider include you get to lean on the familiarity that our users have with Windows Hello. So you get to be integrated directly into the Windows Hello experience. I'll show some of the sort of flows that demonstrate that. You can imagine this is quicker than sort of like a traditional kind of master password user verification flow that a lot of the sort of browser plugins are sort of forced to make their users cope with. And safer than cached UV, which, because of the sort of user experience degradation of asking a user to enter a long master password all the time, a lot of password providers have to opt to a cached UV sort of fallback experience. But with Windows Hello, the hope is that this is enticing enough to use that as a very quick and helpful method to authenticate your users. So first I'm going to look at a flow of enabling a third-party plugin itself. So you can imagine user is on a operating system version that includes this support, and in this case our partner Bitwarden has come in and taken an app update that allowed the user to register their passkey provider. Through a deep link or some other sort of user experience, Bitwarden can entice their user to come to the settings page, and this is where the user will opt into the experience by clicking the enable button. So we protect this with a hello authorization using the shiny new UX that was demonstrated earlier today. And just this simply, the user clicks the button, logs in, and they've enabled their passkey provider. So then now that you have a third-party plugin, how do you actually use it? As you might imagine, it's very closely integrated into the Windows native experience. So here's an example of going to GitHub. You as a user would click the passkey button to add a new credential. You see that we bring in this case, Bitwarden's sort of iconography right into the experience. So it's very native, very integrated within Windows. Continue along, see the Windows Hello prompt, again, reminding the user of where this passkey is being saved to. User authenticates, authorizes, and passkey is created. So what about authentication with a passkey from a third-party plugin? So this is an example of an autofill scenario. In here, the assumption here is user has, in the meantime, went and installed a second plugin authenticator. You can have multiple. And this time, they went through the trouble of putting in one password as well. You see that in this drop-down autofill menu, we have an example of that Bitwarden passkey that we just created in the last flow, and also a one-password passkey that had been created along the way. And so the user decides to authenticate with that. Again, you see that we bring in the iconography of the third-party credential provider into this flow, so it looks very native, very seamless. User decides to authenticate, authorize the authentication, and they get logged on. Next thing I wanted to talk about is our Windows passkey provider for passkeys that would sync within Windows machines, multiple Windows devices if you have them, or being there for when you exchange your lone Windows device for a next one. And so, as a synced passkey provider, we thought long and hard about how the safety model here, the protection model would go. And so, of course, as you would expect, passkeys are end-to-end encrypted. They're securely backed up. And the encryption key that we use to protect your passkeys is protected by Windows Hello. Through a one-time setup step on your first Windows device, we need to go through a ceremony to protect this encryption key. The way this looks like on Windows is the creation of a special encryption passkey that is used to protect this encryption key. So I'll go through the flows in a bit, but basically, the concept here is we need a way to keep the encryption key in the user's possession and not sort of just stored on the server. And by using some of the capabilities that are afforded to us by the WebAuthn standard, we are able to use this. Namely, it's the PRF or pseudo-random function extension. Using this, the experience of a one-time setup on your next Windows device, the user is able to authenticate with that passkey that's stored on this encryption passkey. This is living either on a mobile device or on a security key. And that is how the user was able to sort of safely escrow the encryption key onto their next Windows device. It's important to recognize that this sort of ceremony happens exactly one time on each Windows device. After the user has their encryption key on each Windows device that is in their sort of circle of trust, then it's just passkeys are able to sync naturally and automatically through our Windows cloud. So let's take a look at how this looks, how this works out. So one-time setup on the first device. Going back to our familiar example of going to GitHub, user decides to create a passkey. We recognize that the user has not gone through a one-time setup and might benefit from a sync passkey provider on Windows, and so we offer that through this UI here. If the user opts to proceed, they say so, and then we provide the user an opportunity to save their special encryption passkey using a roaming FIDO authenticator. Naturally, that is going to take the form of using the hybrid protocol to scan onto a mobile device, but there is an opportunity here to switch this to use a security key if that's what the user opts to do. So in this example, the user decided to use their mobile device, scans the QR code. They're able to create this encryption passkey, and then the user is able to proceed completing the registration ceremony that they meant to in the first place. They continue. We see now, very familiar to what you guys saw earlier when I was showing off the third-party flow, only this time saving to our passkey provider. User opts to continue. We see the familiar hello authorization UX, and they're done. Later on, when the user goes to their next device, we can see what that one-time setup looks like. At some opportunistic time, like when the user is going to try to use passkeys, again on GitHub maybe, on their next device, we see that this user in particular has passkeys stored in our sync fabric, and so the user is offered the opportunity to bring those passkeys down to this second Windows device. Much as we saw before, the user is offered this QR code to scan because we've identified that the user had chosen to use a mobile device in the one-time setup on their first Windows device experience. The user is able to authenticate with that. After a couple seconds of syncing passkeys down and protecting those, storing them in hello, sync completes. And now we're able to actually continue with this authentication ceremony. We see that we picked up a passkey along the way, and now that it's available on the user's in the user's sync fabric, or on the user's Windows device coming down from that sync fabric, user is able to authorize this with Windows Hello and authenticate successfully to the website. So the point on Windows, what we're trying to achieve here is giving users the opportunity to use passkeys wherever they need them. And so as it exists today, Windows does support device-bound passkeys, and we will continue to do so. There are options in order to allow users to do that if they so desire. This is particularly interesting in a lot of our enterprise use cases, and so that is a capability that we will continue to maintain. With this work that's coming soon, we are also bringing sync passkeys to Windows devices through this native passkey provider that I just described. This gives users an inbox sort of trusted mechanism to save passkeys that are durable across their different operating systems, different Windows installations. And then for synchronizing across different platforms, we are bringing into scope support for these third-party passkey providers as well. And so taken all together, we feel that this meets all the use cases of users on Windows, and we're happy that we're able to do this. You're going to start to see these capabilities coming soon in the Windows Insider program, and we have a target for launch sometime in early 2025. Thank you.
Hi, Bob. Dean Sachs from Beyond Identity. Great talk. Question about the third-party passkey providers. Do you support device-bound passkeys with third-party passkey providers?
Third-party passkey providers that wish to have device-bound passkeys?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Let's see the other platforms do that as well. Thanks.
They already do. When do we get WebAuthn.hv8?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
When do we get WebAuthn.hv8? When are the header files coming out for this?
Soon.
Okay. Cool.
Sorry, you mentioned Windows Hello was a public key. I thought Windows Hello was symmetric and Windows Hello for Business was asymmetric. Just making sure there's still that distinction or not anymore?
No. Windows Hello in all instances is a asymmetric key scheme. We protect private keys inside the operating system, protected by the TPM. Public keys get stored on a server.
Okay, all right. And then a completely different question. So in my bag, I have my phone, my laptop, my YubiKey. I lose all of three, so I don't have any devices anymore that is trusted for that fabric. Is there a recovery path for my async passkeys?
Well, you're having a bad day if you lose all your devices.
Right.
Sorry about that.
It happens.
Yeah, so if you have kept all of your devices in one spot, that is unfortunately a tough spot for you. If you were to use a security key to set this whole thing up, sort of standard FIDO hygiene would recommend that you would have had a second security key that you put in your safety deposit box, separated from your items. If you were to use a mobile device and you save that to a sync fabric, then that should be available on your next mobile device when you go buy it, and you bring that credential down.
So there is potentially a path. I guess where I'm going is there potentially an admin recovery, like from your side, like from Entra for?
So with the model that I just described, we're using like a FIDO2 roaming authenticator as the mechanism to protect our encryption key. And we do not additionally encrypt that thing into Entra.
Thank you.
Hi, for the encryption passkey, does Windows Hello allow it to be generated in third-party passkey providers?
We do allow that. We will pass the extension along.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
Extending to that question, so the way you showed when I'm scanning a QR code, that's mean the encryption passkey is getting stored in that mobile device operating system cloud provider, I can assume. If I'm using an iOS device, encryption passkey is stored in iCloud.
It is stored on your chosen provider that you've opted to save the credential on your iOS device. So yes, that could be your iCloud keychain, it could be 1Password, it could be.
So if I bring a new Windows device and scan a QR code, this time I'm using the passkey, and encrypted passkey, which was created from the first device. And on the second device, when I prove the passkey authentication, the second Windows Hello, the device will create another passkey on that device itself? Or every time I should use a QR code to log in?
No. So think of it as we have an encryption key that we're going to use to protect all of your passkeys. That encryption key needs to be protected by end-to-end encryption. So we need to find a mechanism to get that encryption key onto all of your Windows devices. So only the first time you introduce this to your next Windows device do we need to use the special encryption passkey to get this key over to the new device. After that's done, after we've accomplished that, we save that key into Windows Hello, and you do not need the mobile device or the security key anymore.
How is it different from what we have today called cross-device QR code on passkey, which I can still use on a Windows laptop with a Mac, with an iOS device?
You could do that, but as our Google partners just showed us before, Users don't like the idea of having to authenticate with a mobile device all the time. That is an available option. They can do so if they so choose. But what this mechanism does that I described is you do that one time for the lifetime of this device, and then now you're using a platform authenticator to utilize passkeys from then on.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Keith Butcher, Apple Security. We've integrated with the third-party credential providers on other systems. We found some interesting edge cases. Just wondering if there's any known limitations about where third-party passkeys can get used on Windows, specifically around the operating system login.
So we don't support third-party passkeys for operating system logon to Windows.
You don't?
We don't,
Okay,
no.
okay. That's
No.
my question,
But
basically.
yeah, I mean, our intention by making this, by passing on the true WebAuthn request, we're hoping to accomplish as many sort of scenarios that third parties would leverage. If in the course of integrating with us, there are some rough edges or things that you would like us to know about, please let us know.
Will do. Thank you.
Yep.
Going back to the recovery scenario and the establishment of that encryption key, which it sounds like it's PRF powered, is there an allowance for, I wanted to understand if there was an allowance for a second security key, for example, to be backed up. So in that total device loss, you would still have a path towards recovering your account.
You can have, there's a practical limit on the number of recovery encryption passkeys you can have, but it's a large enough limit that you could create 10 security keys if you'd like.
Specifically for recovery?
For this, yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have a couple more questions from viewers online and elsewhere before we wrap up and go into the break. So in the account settings screenshot that you showed earlier, you had a toggle option that allowed to save passkeys to this device. What does that do, and what happens if that is toggled off?
Toggled off?
Yeah.
So that is the toggle that allows a user to decide if they prefer to use device-bound passkeys as well. So if that is toggled off, you will, in our enumeration flows, you will not see that option enumerated. If you are the type of user that wants a choice on a per registration basis, you would flip that to on, and then you could actually negotiate which provider you want to save to, including device-bound.
Excellent. And then how are device-bound and sync passkeys presented differently? Will the user be able to know the difference between the two?
So our intention is in that enumeration flow and also in the sort of consent UI that I was harping on how we push the third party's iconography through that flow. That is our hope is that the user will understand the intention there as well and understand where their passkeys are ultimately bound, going towards.
And then can users use their Entra account to save and sync passkeys?
For V1, no. This is a consumer feature. We have grand aspirations to continue this journey into the enterprise as well.
And a question from the guy right there. I noticed that a new feature was submitted on WebAuthn called compound attestation. Do you know what this is? And if so, what kind of use cases does it cover?
I'm not going to comment yet on how we are going to involve ourselves in attestation for sync passkeys, but we are definitely looking at we are active participants in all of these discussions and will continue along with the rest of FIDO.
Right on. Okay, we have 50 seconds left, so I can ask one more. Are there plans to offer Windows Hello as a secondary method so my IT department can force unlocking the machine with a password and then still use passkeys once the machine is unlocked?
Yes, that happens today. Now, with the caveat that today we don't, if you have Hello enabled, it will be advertised as an option for device logon. If the question is, we don't want that to happen, that is feedback we've received and we are evaluating it.
Excellent. All right, Bob. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. Give him a round of applause.
Thanks, Bob.